What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third album by singer Nelly Furtado. Basically, this project came out in the late spring of 2006, and it's called Loose. Now, this album was produced heavily by Timbaland and his protege Donja. Donja is kind of a producer that had showed up later on rap albums and stuff, but he kind of started getting his rig in like the mid 2000s. But Timbaland was working with Justin Timberlake and such, and he worked with Nelly Furtado on this album, and it was a pretty large hit. This is definitely part of a particular sound that Timbaland was all over the place between like 2006 and early or late 2008 or so. Songs like Apologize and Sexy Back and a song off this album, Promiscuous, and some of those type ones. So this was definitely a part of that. But this album, this particular Nelly Furtado album, had a lot of promotional cycle, which is definitely a good thing. It lasted for quite some time. It lasted between like the spring of 2006 to about the spring or even summer of 2008. Longer than I remember seeing it last, longer than I remember the cycle of it being. There were 8 singles off this project, so it was actually a pretty whopping thing. It went multi-platinum, and it's probably in a time when music was starting to kind of slag just because of internet downloads and that type of stuff. This was definitely an album that at least shined through somewhat. It's one of the more popular albums from like the 2005 to 2009 time period. And that's what it took. I mean, really, I kind of feel like this album undersold because it only went 3 times platinum, despite the fact that it had 2 number 1s and 8 singles. Now, in the United States, not all 8 of these singles charted. It was kind of varying. This was very much an international album. It was popular in Europe. It was popular in Spain. It was popular in Latin charts. It was popular just a whole bunch of places that it had popularity and that type of stuff as far as that kind of went. But I look after it being able to say that 3 times platinum for an 8 single album is relatively light. And that should tell you just about how that kind of went as far as it not being a more popular album from the 2000s. But it's definitely a highlight. This is one that if you want to do some research on like the 2000s decade, this is if you want to do some research on the 2000s decade, this is a good one to dig up just because particularly 2006 and 2007, Nelly Furtado was a really hot ticket. She was all over the place and pretty much one of the central figures of like contemporary music around that time. She definitely was like all over 2006, all over 2007. And it's too bad that like she didn't have another album as large as this. I don't want to say that her career tarnished, but it just felt like I know she dropped an Espanol album in 2009, but it took her all the way until 2012 to put out a follow-up to like this Loose album in terms of that concept. So really, I mean, Nelly was kind of only dropping albums every 3 years. Like her previous album came out in '03, and the one before that, I want to say, was either 2001 or even the year 2000. But she just didn't drop that commonly. So it took her, because she dropped, and it's not like there's a problem with the Espanol album, but it's too bad that it took her until 2012. I mean, that 6 year gap was kind of the reason why it just kind of feels like Nelly Furtado may not be a one album wonder, but this is definitely seen as one of her biggest, just because she wasn't able to follow it up. And really, if I had been her, I would have put out like another album. Like, I know this album had a promotional cycle of about 2 years, and she probably went on world tour and stuff. But yeah, I don't know if she just got burnt out, but it was just like, damn, because I would have liked to have seen like a 2009, 2010 edition of some of the hits that she had in 2006. So I want to say, I don't know if she teamed up with Timbaland again on her 2012 album. I don't know if that sound lasted at that point. It was this kind of thing. So we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So, yeah, there were 8 of them. So we're going to be here for a little bit talking about this, and then I'll talk about the rest of the hits on here. This is definitely a rave album. It's going to get a pretty high score. So the first single is No I Equal, which means there's no equal. And this is the first single that came out before the album dropped. And this is a nice tropical nightclub bop. I definitely like to feel this one. Just very kind of reggaeton-esque and just kind of tropic-like. Very much a summer type bop, and definitely an evening booty shaker with a lot of good energy. Definitely like the concept behind that. I mean, these initial singles that you get from Nelly Furtado really turned up the energy, kind of like the album title says, being loose, a little bit more tense, moist. just kind of a little bit more tense and ready to go and kind of dance and bop and that type of stuff. So these are just some good dance club bops. I definitely like the concept of it. It's just, I mean, I feel like Promiscuous has the better beat, but this is still a pretty good one. This is definitely a good kind of furious shaker to kind of have to really move about and dance to. This could easily be some pretty ravenous nightclub energy. So it's definitely a good one. Promiscuous is the second single, and this is pretty much the one that kicked off the album. This one hit number one. I don't know if this was Nelly Furtado's first number one single, but it probably was. I think that just based upon the concept, this was one of the largest hits out of 2006, and probably I would almost go on to say this is probably one of the larger songs out of the 2000s decade. Like scanning the 2000s decade, this is definitely one kind of like Gwen Stefani's Hollaback Girl and Beyonce's Crazy in Love and 50 Cent's In the Club and some of those type moments as far as some of that kind of goes. This is just a central kind of highlight of the 2000s decade here. It's a very vanilla night venue song, though. I mean, I look after it's got such a classic beat, and I really like the concept behind it. It's just kind of a sparkling, kind of flashy kind of bit, especially in the chorus, how that kind of interprets. And I like Timbaland being on this song. He definitely gave this song a lot of spice. I like the concept of how that song kind of went. It's just kind of like a bickering back and forth kind of song, but it's a clever rendition of it. So you would think it's a gimmick song, but it really isn't. It's just a clever kind of male perspective, female perspective kind of song that works really well. And it's a nice dance hopper, really catchy with an affable chorus. So I just feel like this song deserved to hit number one. It's just a classic kind of night venue kind of track, but it is kind of vanilla nowadays. I think it had a lot of energy back in 2006, 2007, but this is probably a song that got played quite a bit in the club. So it's just kind of vanilla now when you hear it, but still a good one. The third single is Man Eater, and this is another vanilla nightclub song. I mean, this one's not a vanilla night venue song, but it's kind of a vanilla nightclub song, someplace where you're going to hear music and kind of dance out and about and that type of stuff. It's a couple it's definitely a couple steps edgier than Promiscuous, and it's a nice one to hear. I do kind of feel like this one. I mean, this one didn't hit number one, but it did crack like the top 20 of the Billboard 100. So I definitely look at that concept. This is just a furious kind of dance club song. I like this song better than No I Igual, but then they're both pretty good. I think all three of these are great ones to kind of have as far as that kind of goes. Yeah, I would definitely have to say that these. I mean, just Nelly Furtado nails the chorus on here. This is a real catchy one that she does by herself, and this kind of immediately establishes like a highlight as far as being able to get some of these album cuts that are singles. So just being able to get to the third single just like that is pretty good. And this was not just like an underperforming song. This is actually one that you might hear on kind of like a random day. I mean, maybe not 16 years later, 17 years later, but definitely for the time, it was probably like a kind of off the wall, maybe like a Wednesday, Thursday song that you kind of hear. But it is a vanilla nightclub song, at least it was back in the 2000s. But I kind of look after it's just a good gem to kind of have. It's kind of underrated nowadays. It's definitely one to kind of remember and bring back into the fold, because for the most part, when you think of Nelly Furtado nowadays, it's just Promiscuous and maybe Say It Right. But speaking of Say It Right, that's the fourth single, and this is a song that hit number one. Say It Right is the fourth single, and this is another song that in the United States hit number one. So this is definitely what helped establish Nelly Furtado as this being kind of like a vintage and almost pretty much classic album, especially out of R&B and pop music and dance music. It's a slower dance track, has a great melody on here. Nelly Furtado really nails the singing on here. Great chorus, just kind of a rhythmic, kind of 80s like tune. Definitely feels like something that like I want to say like the Eurythmics or something like that. The folks that did Sweet Dreams are made of this. It's kind of similar to that kind of vibe. Just not quite. I mean, that one's more up tempo, but this one's just kind of a slower dance track, which I didn't catch that initially. I've heard this song for quite a while, but I kind of didn't see it as like a dance song. But I looked on the song when I looked it up, and it did chart on like the dance chart. So this whole album, Nelly Furtado basically, this whole album, damn near in the singles, Nelly Furtado hit the dance club charts quite a bit. And there's just songs on here that charted in that chart that were surprising. Like I could see Promiscuous, Man Eater, and No I Igual, but Say It Right, I didn't see that. But it's just kind of a slower dance number. It's a slower dance track with meaning, still kind of contemporary, has a great chorus, and it's almost like a trance song. I feel like this is such a sluggish kind of song. This could almost be like for a trance club. I don't think maybe that's wholesomely what Nelly Furtado was aiming for, but I can kind of see it that way just because it's such a soft core kind of song. was just a nice one. Deserved to hit #1. All Good Things Come to an End is the fifth single, and this is another one. This was kind of a winter 2007 song. I like the concept behind it. Didn't quite chart as heavily as the first four singles, but still a pretty decent one. It's a solid ballad, and it's a blue collar track. I didn't used to like this song, but I kind of see it's kind of like a heavier kind of song. But I look at the concept behind it. It's a nice blue collar kind of makeshift kind of song, similar to stuff that like Rihanna and Kelly Clarkson kind of do and some of those type folks as far as that kind of went. It's just the most makeshift. I mean, for the most part, Nelly Furtado is not really the chick for makeshift kind of standard, kind of affable day to day type tracks, at least not on this album. But it's interesting to kind of get this track that kind of has that affirmation about it. It's kind of somewhat a jam, but it's pretty straightforward. I mean, this is a song that this is a song like I was saying that kind of charts on like the dance club charts, which is kind of surprising, but is interesting just because I think these are just slow jams as far as that kind of goes. But I look at the concept. I mean, this one's if Say It Right was kind of a more emotional and kind of more tugging kind of song. I feel like all good things come to an end. It's an even more tugging song. It's pretty straightforward with what it is, but it is still somewhat a jam, and it's just kind of a more hold you close kind of song and that sort of concept as far as that kind of goes. Just a little bit one with some meaning more towards it, but it is kind of it's a more of a ballad and makeshift in my opinion, but it can be like a slow dance type cut. So it's decent, it's solid for that, and it's one I recommend. Tay Busquet is the sixth single. This one crested throughout the summer of 2007, so this is a year after the album came out, and it means the Tay Busquet means I looked for you, and so basically, Tay Busquet is an almost song for me. I mean, I like most of this song. I kind of feel like this is like some date night music. This has like these really kind of hazy, just kind of anguished, and just kind of like this has like these hazy, anguished kind of evening type feels of like guitar licks on the song. Definitely reminds me of like a date night song, something that maybe something even at like a restaurant, something like that. Not really a dance song, but it feels meant for like hazy autumn days, just something like that. Just like a typical kind of orange, pink, purple kind of autumn sky, something like that. Just a real dusky kind of day. It's real kind of a sullen song, but it's compelling. So I like the concept behind that one. But the reason why it's an almost song is because the chorus is just not quite as catchy. I mean, it's not like it's a bad chorus, but I just think it probably could have been more melodic. It just kind of comes off as more like a chant that just didn't quite have the quite compellingness. I mean, I'm not sure what it means in English, but I do have to say it. This is not quite as catchy as some of the ones. And it's not because it's in Spanish that it's not catchy. It's the fact that it just, compared to songs like Man Eater, Promiscuous, Say It Right, Do It, Glow, some of those type ones, No Hay Igual. Like No Hay Igual had a better chorus. That one was a chantable chorus that just had a lot of compelling spark towards it. But this one's just a little bit more of like kind of like this kind of dramatic kind of chorus that just didn't quite have the correct type like shock and compellingness towards it. But so that's kind of the thing. But it is an almost song. Do It is the seventh single. So yeah, we got to the seventh single. This is one that kind of crested in the late summer of 2007. And some of these, most of the singles past like All Good Things Come to an End didn't really chart in America. These last three singles, that starting with Tay Busquet, didn't really kind of chart in America, but it's still, they kind of would have if they would have crested better. But these are just kind of international ones, but I'll still talk about them. So Do It's really like a glitzy kind of dance club gem, very hooky, very catchy, and it's peppy and affable. This one's probably about like a more bubbly and bouncy kind of feel compared to Promiscuous, where Promiscuous was pretty bouncy also, but this one's just a lot more glitzy, kind of electro pop. Definitely like that kind of concept. It's just a real nice bubbly song that has some real affirmable, kind of affable energy that I liked on here. So it's just kind of a gem for that. Very inviting. Then In God's Hands was the eighth single, and this is the only single out of the eight that I didn't enjoy. And this one basically is just kind of like adult contemporary, and it just kind of had like a more kind of ballad type feel. So this is the second ballad after All Good Things Come to an End, but I feel like All Good Things at least kind of had a little bit more rhythm towards it, and a little bit more catchiness. But In God's Hands was just really, this one tried to craft like the makeshift kind of crank that like Fergie and Rihanna and Kelly Clarkson kind of did, but for some reason it just didn't pull off. Like when I think of Makeshift, you think of like Big Girls Don't Cry by Fergie or something like that. But somehow Nelly Furtado just didn't do it. She definitely had these dance club songs down, but she just didn't have like the day-to-day makeshift kind of job life figured out this time. I just feel like this one just did not quite crest as well. And in the chart, she even remixed it with Keith Urban for like America, and that's not the version of the song I listened to. But I think either way, I probably wouldn't have preferred it. But it just didn't quite have the catchiness and like the compellingness as far as that kind of went. But she did get to the eighth singles. That's definitely hats off for that. And I just would have to say, the version of the album I'm reviewing off Spotify has 14 songs on here. So basically, the Spotify version puts like the interludes on here. So there's actually 17 songs, but minus 3 interludes, there's 14. But on the actual album, there's 12 songs if you subtract the Te Busque Spanish version, which was on the original 2006 version. So there's supposed to be 12 songs, but they added 2 bonus songs, which are Let My Hair Down and Somebody to Love. So out of those 14 songs, I recommend at least out of those 14 songs, I recommend at least 8, but then there's 2 almost songs. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend the 8 songs and the almost songs. I'll talk about it. So the 8 songs are No Hay Igual, Promiscuous, Man Eater, Say It Right, All Good Things Come to an End, Do It, Glow, and Showtime. And the 2 almost songs are Let My Hair Down and Te Busque. So talk about the ones. Basically, minus the 6 singles, there's 2 more songs I recommend, which I feel like Glow is like a nice electro dance gem, has a bouncy vibe with a nice pace for dancing. It's just an overall great dance song. And this one's just really catchy. Like some of these melodies on here, Nelly Furtado really knocked out of the park. These are just some good examples of like excellence on here. I feel like Glow, Showtime, Say It Right, Promiscuous, No Hay Igual. Some of these just have some great melodies and great singing as far as that kind of goes. These are just catchy. But I definitely would say that Glow is like another dance gem. So even in the album cuts, even despite the fact that there are 8 singles, Nelly Furtado still managed to pump out this album with even more and go the extra mile as far as making that happen, which is definitely good. And then Showtime is kind of like another somber type song. This is a somber R&B type track, very similar to Say It Right, but it has great melodies on here. This is some really great singing. I think this is kind of intended for like folks who have something that they have to do, like maybe make a speech or go on stage or something like that, and they're kind of nervous. So Nelly Furtado kind of made a song. It's kind of somber just because of the feeling that you have when you have to get ready to make like a presentation or something, just in that context. I do like the concept of the message that the song conveys. Just kind of a nice somber song for that sort of pitch, but it is a nice melody overall. It's not really a dance song. It's just kind of like a kind of more bluesy kind of R&B track that's not very similar to most stuff on here. But Nelly Furtado does kind of have some of these somber moments. She pulls it off. I mean, she's not necessarily emo and moody, but she does kind of have differential topics as far as switching it up, not having all this just be, bubblegum pop. So it's just interesting kind of get that one. And then Let My Hair Down. And then Let My Hair Down was an almost song just because I really like the production on here. It's very much a boppy kind of ground level dance song, has some mild tropical type feeling towards it, but I kind of feel like the chorus, this definitely felt like an afterthought. I feel like this song was definitely kind of an afterthought compared to the rest of the album. It's just kind of a bonus cut. And I Let My Hair Down just really felt like an afterthought. I can tell that it was kind of supposed to be a bonus cut. And it's not that it doesn't have the wholesome polish, but it just doesn't quite have like the sheer kind of packaging resolve of like, I don't know. It feels a lot looser. I just would have to say that this song feels a lot looser compared to like some of the songs like Say It Right or Do It or something like that. It just kind of feels like an extra kind of bonus song that you'd hear on YouTube or something like that that just didn't even make the album. So really, I don't know which version. I would at least say maybe the European edition has some of these extra ones, but I'm not sure what edition of this album, because I own this album, but I own the 2006 version of the album. So I'm not sure what version of the album I'd have to get some of these bonus songs. It's a decent one. I kind of halfway recommend it, but the chorus is just kind of like, it's not necessarily it's kind of like, B minus S, where it's a good kind of sultry kind of one, but it's not quite as sheerly effective as like Man Eater, Promiscuous, and Do It, Showtime, some of those type ones, but it is pretty solid. So it just kind of happens to be a thing. That's an almost song. Talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy, like There were some weak ones on here. Like I kind of didn't like the altitude of Afraid. That one was kind of a message that I wasn't quite connecting with. That one was just kind of like another kind of tepid kind of song, very similar to like Showtime, but just a different variation of that. So I didn't connect with that one as much. I didn't like Wait for You. That probably had one of the worst beats on here. Just kind of was not very affable in terms of like how that one connected. And then In God's Hands was kind of the only single I didn't like out of the eight, which just didn't was just kind of a poor rendition of like a makeshift kind of ballad and stuff that didn't connect with me. And then Somebody to Love kind of felt like a kind of mid-tempo kind of dance bop, but it just had a lot going on in the productions. It just was one that kind of just didn't keep my attention as much. This was kind of not quite as compelling as like some of the better cuts on here. It's kind of like I said, this one kind of didn't have as much of the polish as the album cuts that were on the regular album kind of did. But I don't know, it just felt less kind of focused compared to some of these. So that's just kind of the concept. But me liking basically 8 songs out of 14 plus 2 almost songs, I'm gonna go ahead and give this album. I'm gonna give this album like a 9.25 out of 10 because that's quite a bit. I definitely feel like I know 8 out of 14 it doesn't really feel like 9 territory, but these 2 songs, I do feel like Tay Busquet and Let My Hair Down are good enough to listen to. So even though they're almost songs, I do get the feeling that at some stage I could like these a lot more. It just takes the concept of listening to them more and just getting used to them and kind of just, seeing that there is more quality to them than what initially thought. But I do like them enough to recommend. So I definitely feel like this is, talking liking 10 songs out of 14 is definitely pretty stellar. So that's definitely something to be rewarded. So it gets a 9.25 out of 10. The social score, though, I'm going to go ahead and give the social score a 10 out of 10 because there are 8 singles and there's plenty to do on here. Nelly Furtado packs this album with dance cuts. She has different moods, different concepts, plenty of stepping out Friday, Thursday, Saturday type moments. Some makeshift songs in here, some adult contemporary type songs. There's plenty of differential topics. It covers a lot of grounds. It's an international album, so it's popular in Europe and places like that, other continents, South America, some of these type places. Just being able to say that there are festivities and international and nationalities that it connects with as far as that kind of goes. It's just a good overall album. Definitely have to talk and have the concept of saying hats off about these dance cuts just because the fact that there's so many of them or most folks probably just pick like 1 or 2 and then call it a day. I feel like just the fact that this went, the extra mile as far as trying to pump out some of these stepping out kind of numbers. It definitely keeps up with the concept of the album title Loose and has like some good vibes that just assure like some great weekend feeling. So it's definitely something to say. Yeah, that's the social score. So in terms of the future, like Nelly Furtado has been kind of quiet. I haven't paid as much attention. It's kind of difficult to just because, like I said, after this album from 2006, she took 6 years before she dropped another English album, and that album really didn't chart that heavily. So she kind of lost her sweet spot as far as that kind of went. I don't know what she's been up to. That's just as of 2012. That's 11 years ago from that point. So I just don't know what she's been up to nowadays. I'd have to see. It seems like she's kind of an afterthought nowadays, but I probably will review a few more. I probably will review a few more of her albums, probably the 2012 one, something like that, to see what's up with her.